All right. Thank you everyone for joining us today. My name is Elise Bortolato, and I'm the Program Manager for the Emerging Enterprise Center, a nonprofit business incubator here in Wilmington, Delaware. We recently began sharing startup stories of Delaware entrepreneurs to showcase the work of innovation happening here in the state, and to also share personal journeys and advice from different founders to hopefully inspire future entrepreneurs. Today, I'm really excited to be talking with seasoned deal strategist and financier of startup and small businesses, Pedro Moore, to hear his journey of how he became the CEO and co-founder of FundingFuel. Pedro is also a venture capital advisor to venture firms, angel investors, investment groups, successful startups, and celebrity clients such as Daymond John of ABC's hit TV show Shark Tank, which we all love. And Pedro also co-founded two businesses, the Coin Loft and Bump and Play, that you guys might have heard of here in Delaware. So welcome, Pedro. We're excited to be talking to you today. And anyone who's joining us, please feel free to throw your comments and questions down into the comments, and we'll hopefully address them as we go along. So welcome.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Wonderful.
Hope your day's going great.
We already have some people joining us, which is great.
Oh, awesome. Awesome.
So for those who might have missed my opening spiel about who you are, I would love it if you could just briefly give a little description about your company for those who are just joining us.
Yeah, absolutely. So the company I have is called FundingFuel. FundingFuel is basically allows fractional investing for everyday person. So the everyday person, we define it as a non-accredited or accredited investor. And it's basically an affordable way to passively invest in franchise opportunities.
Wonderful. I actually was, as I was kind of learning about your company, it reminded me a little bit of Fundrise, which is similar, where people kind of can personally invest in real estate portfolios, maybe. Yes. Group kind of almost group crowdfunding for real estate. So that's awesome.
Yes, thank you. But it makes sense. That's essentially it.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk more about your company too, because I find it to be, for me, who would be that non-accredited investor who can't afford to purchase a franchise that I'm aware of yet. I'm excited to learn more about that. But before we jump into talking about your company, I always know that success is not a straight line. And I'm always kind of curious of how people kind of winded their way to where they are. So I would love to know a little bit about you and why you started a company. So for instance, like, where did you grow up, Pedro?
Sure. I'm actually born and raised Delaware. I went to, which is not too far from you guys, your old office in Newcastle, William Penn High School, and then went to University of Delaware. I studied marketing management, and now also I made a little history where I founded the Entrepreneurship Club at the University of Delaware, which is actually still running today. Which has helped supporting the movement of entrepreneurship. And so, but yeah, I'm born and raised Delaware.
So that's interesting. So you went into that marketing and then you started entrepreneurship. So you've always had an interest, passion. Did you have any kind of smaller business startups in college?
Yes, I was one of those guys who was probably going to sell you candy at one point. I was that. So my first business was started back maybe when I was 8 or so. I can't remember the exact time. And so my grandfather had a farm or a garden, if you will, where he had rows and rows of vegetables, fruit, et cetera, et cetera. And he also had a pecan tree, a couple pecan trees around the house. And so he lives down, he passed away a couple years ago, but they used to live down in North Carolina. Out in I say country, as in when it's one house every 16 miles. So it's that type of country. But anyway, so whenever I visit, I'll go down there and I'll either help them pick watermelon. It was watermelon cantaloupe. And we'll go to the local grocery store and we'll sell it there. Same thing, especially I think it was around November, where the pecans typically fall off the tree. And so I will go down there, gather them all up, take what I have, again, go sell it to the local grocery store. And for the watermelon, we didn't always sell that to the local grocery store. What we'll do, with my granddad, he'll have a little pickup truck, and we'll sit out front in the parking lot of the pickup truck. With the grocery store, and we'll sell the watermelon to the local residents as they walk by. And so that was really spearhead my entrepreneur spirit. From there, every year after that, in middle school, not middle school, elementary school, middle school, I was always selling something, whether it's music, video games, magazines, cheat codes to video games, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. One time I even started selling a lot of comic book cards, and my mother got mad at me because she was like, hold on, I bought all that stuff for you. Now you selling it? I was, that was just my mindset.
Yeah, but you're like, I'm doing it on a profit. So
yeah, you were my angel investor. You were my Shark Tank investor when you bought me those comic cards.
I also love how your grandfather had a pop-up shop before it was cool to have a pop-up
shop. Yeah. I never even thought about that. But yeah, he did have a pop-up shop. Yeah.
There you go. Yeah. So it's nice to see. That's kind of what I find more interesting, is to kind of see. So you kind of were a little more fearless on the sense of selling and kind of getting things out there in front of people.
Yes.
Understanding how to take something and find the profit in it through resale. So
yes. Yeah.
I'm actually curious too, is how did you come across? So you started, I had mentioned, for those who are just kind of joining, you had two businesses that you co-founded prior to FundingFuel. And I'm wondering what it is that kind of, like, where was that pop, like that idea that came into you to say, like, wow, we should do something like this for franchises?
Sure. Well, for franchise, so for FundingFuel. Yeah. So yeah, it's a couple things happened. One, to your point, Lisa, earlier when you were saying that, I'm a non-accredited investor and I don't have the means to invest or own a franchise. Same thing happened to me. Growing up, I always had typically everybody would love to own a McDonald's. That's always the story narrative. Now it's Chick-fil-A, but it was the same thing. Growing up, I'm like, man, I would love to be. It would be great. And the reality is, I never really wanted to run one. I just wanted to own one, right? But when you do a quick search of how much those things cost, you're like, never mind. And so that bug has always been there, but because the cost, I just never thought about it. But then kind of fast forwarding, I have a venture fund I used to work at. We did come across a deal. It doesn't normally fit our criteria, but I was just intrigued and curious about it. It was actually an early stage franchising system. And so at the time, she was trying to raise some money, and I explored it because I was just curious. And we didn't do anything because it didn't fit the criteria of the things that we invested in. Normally invest in tech, but I was just really intrigued, and it made me think back to the days of me thinking about owning my own. And I said, and then one other variable is that I always have a passion for entrepreneurship and building wealth for people. And I knew that, and I just doing deals in venture, you deal with a lot of accredited investors, and I just realized that the accredited investors just have access to a lot more opportunities than the non-accredited. And we typically, thinking about myself, only had the stock market to invest in. And then after a while, you're like, I want to do something else, right? And something I can really kind of, get behind. And so kind of putting all those things together, I'm like, one, there was already portals out there for startups, and there was already stuff for real estate, like you said. But I realized with that, seeing an opportunity with that franchisor, I'm like, but no one's really addressing it for franchises. And so that's where the research or the aha began to open, because I already know naturally at one point in someone's life, at least more than half of the people in the US have thought about owning a franchise at one point or another, at least once, right? Not to say that they did any research, but they thought about it. But most of them probably said no is because the money. And so I figured, like, hey, I think this would be a perfect solution for those people, because now it's not a money issue. Now you can still at least own a piece of it, just for, a few $100s. And so that's where all that kind of came into play. And it was helped with my personal mission of helping the everyday person build their wealth up, and maybe possibly create another income stream for them, because the expectation is that they could possibly earn passive income from these, similar to real estate. No, so that's how all that got connected.
Yeah, I find it interesting because I do think it's another, like you said, another avenue into passive income, especially as a low bar for entry for the common investor like myself.
Yes.
So with the pandemic, everyone has shifted. Has there been anything in this? Have you guys had to kind of pivot during this moment? Is there anything you've learned from this moment?
Yes. Not heavily, but everybody. So, for example, before COVID hit, there was a deal that we had. It was actually in a franchise deal in the hotel industry, and I had about 80% interest in that. So we're getting close to participating in a deal. It was actual acquisition, and unfortunately, it was around the time when COVID hit, and of course, hotels is one of the industries that got hit the worst, and so that just went downhill. And so the slight pivot was not to say that hotels are not of interest today, because now is more of a turnaround strategy for opportunities. And actually, we just kind of helped a guy get into another deal just recently, but another franchise hotel deal. But it did make us think, okay, we have to look at business models that are kind of COVID-proof now today. We have to explore that as part of our pipeline. Look at, the deal, because franchise is a large industry, but we talk about how restaurants took a huge impact, a huge hit. But there's also some restaurants that did not. Some restaurants flourished. And it was the restaurants that were already set up. For example, Domino's didn't really take a huge hit. And I think Wingstop and the models that are already set up for delivery, they probably thrive. And even the home service sector in general thrive during COVID. So it did make us kind of pivot or change our focus in terms of what sectors to really spend more of our time to help find deal flow. And that's what it taught us.
And so I actually, something that kind of goes into that question a little bit, and it is great that you guys did start, you didn't have to drastically pivot, but it is good that this moment kind of was a teaching lesson for you with how you're looking at deals going forward. Is there anything that kind of keeps you up at night as a co-founder? Some of your biggest challenges that you face?
Yeah. I think for any business, competition is always going to be a threat. Who's the next person that's coming to take your market share, right? That's always a threat. The other one is regulation. We're about to come up to finally being able to apply as a funding portal, and so the risk is I'm pretty confident, but I'm not the one making the decision, right? And so what if someone says no? That means it just delays things even longer. And so that's always in the back of my mind, or just any regulation changes, because to allow transactions to happen online for non-accredited people is a heavy regulated sector. And so any change can impact the business heavily. So so little things like that, I shouldn't say little, because it could impact your business heavily, are things that can keep me up at night.
Those are two big things. And yes. I feel like a lot of entrepreneurs have this market share fear. How it's getting first to market, getting the largest market share, becoming a brand that's known. Is there anything that you guys have done to help kind of combat that is there anything you guys do in your business to hopefully, there's nothing wrong with competition, but it is good to know how to differentiate yourself, how to, again, keep that market share. Is there anything you guys do suggestions you have for people with that fear?
Good question. So to answer your question, I believe as a general tip to help people invest, is building rapport, trust. And so one way in the world of marketing, well, first, the one differentiator is that we're trying to be the sole portal to focus exclusively on franchises and allow credit and non-credit investors to invest. That's one. But that's not to say someone coming up next won't do the same exact thing. So still, how do we stick around? And so our strategy is education, content delivery, and trying to build as much rapport and community-based people to build trust to enough that obviously they'll spend more and then refer people to us. And if I were to tie an economic component to it, that will drive down our customer acquisition costs significantly. One of the biggest hurdles in this space of online crowdfunding or online investing, whatever word a person wants to use, is the customer acquisition cost. And having that to drive it down, having a solution, a marketing strategy to drive that down to almost be non-existent, that's going to give us the strongest competitive edge, even if someone copies and pastes us to do something exactly. And I think that's going to help us be different. And we're already doing little things like that today to get a lot of organic leads, because we've been generating a lot of organic leads without really any effort on marketing right now. And so there's some more things that we plan to do eventually to kind of create some more noise, some more of this viral component, especially after we launch. But doing things like that where the issue is that sometimes people just do a Facebook ad, think that's going to do something. We're not doing any paid ads, at least in the very beginning. We're trying to find more organic approaches to build up our pipeline, to drive down our customer acquisition costs. And we feel like that will help us really be competitive in the market space.
And you had done a pitch competition, correct, with Black Enterprise? Is that? And
yes, that is correct.
And that was for FundingFuel, correct?
Correct. So
that in itself also kind of gets your brand awareness out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually just won another, I got third place, but I won another pitch competition over this past weekend. And just by doing that alone, I think at least 3 signups came. I mean, I know that 3 is not a large number, but it was not the program is not as big as Black Enterprise, but it was a nice size program, but at least 3 or 4 people, and it only took maybe an hour or 2 out my day, but a couple. So I won money, but then also I got more signups,
and recognition too. I mean, just the eyes on your business.
Yeah, exactly. And I built some connections with some other big time investors too. One of them works for a big time. So I don't want to name his name, but another big time celebrity. So it's a way to kind of build rapport, put the name out there, and just kind of keep going. And so doing little things like that, especially in the earlier stages, I believe kind of helps build that trust component for a lot of people. They kind of where you're accessible, they can touch and feel you, and they kind of fall in love with your brand, fall in love with your story. Even actually, you doing this with me, that's which is why I greatly appreciate it, because little things like this, people kind of fall in love with the brand, fall in love with who you are, and it increases the likelihood of them being a potential one day customer or user of the platform.
I mean, that's kind of like our mission. We're hoping that someone watching here, either in our area or not, gets to know you, maybe wants to reach out, learn more. So I feel like it is important to see the person behind the business that are not always just brands. They're people behind those brands.
Yes.
So I know that I always like to ask, with these startups, your startup, is there anything you can kind of touch, if there was a pinpoint, if you were to put your finger on something that really did kind of help you, I would say, start seeing all of the hard work you guys do flourish a little bit? If there was something you felt like that little snowball turned into a ball?
I will call it, if I understand you correctly, I think the pinpoint, I think, is the online content that we have done with our strategy of content marketing, because that has this delay effect to it, where you put in because at times I'm like, why am I typing this? Why am I trying to create this? Because there's no immediate gratification from it at all. and it's disheartening a little bit, or discouraging, because you're putting this effort, you think, like, oh, I gotta produce this content, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, but you don't see anything. But the content that was produced is helping us today. I think January, I didn't get the numbers yet for February. I think we probably hit the most amount of web traffic hit our site. I think we had like over 100,000 visits this past January alone. And that was all organic from people just searching various queries. For example, there's another thing that I'm doing now where, you know, we just got out of Black History Month, and I started this actually a while ago because of the whole George Floyd thing as a movement to kind of support, because I'm Black, and I want to help support our community, circulate the Black dollar, and the issue is typically we don't support our own community that great, and so they talked about how the dollar doesn't circulate in our own community that well. And so as a way to do that, a lot of people start creating these directories. I think even Google has a feature now to help us support other Black-owned businesses more consciously as a bigger effort. But one thing that a lot of people forget is that franchises are business as well, you know, are independently owned as well. And they sometimes just associate that as, this is a big corporate company, I don't really need to help them out at all. And so with that being said, I created a directory of Black-owned franchise owners, and basically I just kind of created a list. Probably has about 300 people on there now, or addresses on there. And so it's just a way just to kind of say, okay, if you want to support if you want to be on the move and support some Black-owned businesses, also include these franchises, basically. And there isn't a directory out there right now, so we're still building that list, but to the point, I'm at the stage now where, like, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? Because I haven't really got that much impact from it yet. But I believe over time, we will see some good results of kind of giving back and just helping people be more aware of which entities are Black-owned, so they can be more conscious to help support the Black-owned business. Not to say they're not going to support any businesses, but like I said, just statistically speaking, we don't do a great job supporting our own businesses. And so it's just more of a conscious effort to do a better job of supporting our own business. That's all.
Have said so many great little nuggets of advice for those who are tuning in or who will watch this later, because one, it's this content piece. I think that there are a lot of businesses, people like you and I, who are right now, we're creating content, and then that content will have a tail. And you don't always see that instant gratification from the content that you put out. So I think that is an important piece of advice that you could give entrepreneurs. And then also this, I love the way you're saying, like, you know, you're taking the Black Lives Movement, Black History Month, and you're taking your business. And I think anyone who has a business and who has a cause that they want to support, can find, I think, almost like a way of supporting that fits in really well with your own mission. So like you're taking your franchise business or investor business, and then having that advocacy arm through franchising. So I feel like it's creating these different, you don't always have to, it's you're taking your business and finding a way to help it kind of fit into a cause or piece of what you want to support. And I find like it's like a unique way that you just did it that also just feels so connected with what you're doing.
It's part of helping the mission, and then the hope is that it brings more attention to the brand. You know, maybe somebody might sign up because they saw a business that they want to support, et cetera, et cetera. You know, so it's all connected, you know. But it's one of those things where it's an investment, you know, and on the front end in terms of content creation. It is definitely an investment that has this delayed gratification to it.
This is where I can tell you're an entrepreneur, though. You're very good at kind of looking at what you're doing and finding creative ways of kind of expanding your brand into the community and just different avenues of getting people to learn about you. So with that, I also feel like there is, for those who are starting a business, I think one of the pieces that comes up a lot is this funding issue of, you know, I have this great idea. I have this great passion for something, but I don't necessarily have all of the funds I need to really make it a success. So I'd love to learn a little bit more about maybe some things that you have done in your business to help get your business off the ground, if it's either bootstrapping or finding investors. I know you have a co-founder. If there's anything you could talk about and where you started in terms of your funding.
Yes. Well, we're still building, but but some of the things that helped us get us to this point. Self-funding. Right now, we are kind of bootstrapping. The good news is that I am at the same time building relationships with investors, but a lot of investors that I know, they have certain criteria, and we haven't met that criteria yet. But I know when we do meet that criteria, we'll be a better package for them. But to date, self-funding, doing some extraordinary work to kind of help pay certain bills, bringing on a co-founder, which actually helped me, because so one thing too, I also advise or give ideas, but also I'm using as practice. Now this doesn't work in every scenario, but sometimes, we need money for X, whatever X is. Sometimes the X could be a service provider. And that might mean, in my case, it's software development. And so you can pay someone, but maybe as a way to remove the need for money, you bring on someone as a team member and maybe as a co-founder. Especially if you don't have money to pay them up front, maybe you give them a little bit of equity or something, some kind of creative arrangement. And so that can happen in every scenario. So if you need money for X, now if it's for a hard asset, you can't do that, of course. But if it's for some kind of service, maybe there's a workaround, but maybe you don't use that person, but or you give them equity in exchange for that, or you bring them on as a team member or find someone else. But let's just say you can't, but you do need to raise money. So, we sometimes, Daymond John has a story about, and this is public. You could probably Google it. I think when I might have my dates messed up a little bit, but during his prime of building Fubu, I think he said that he had so there's a story about him and LL Cool J wearing a hat inside of a Gap commercial. So that's what really took his business off. But at that same time, I believe he was still working at Red Lobster, I believe. So my point is, don't let your other income source stop. That other income source, whatever it is, whether you're consulting, whether you have something else, whether it's the full-time job, still let that be there to kind of help fund certain projects along the way. And so and that's just more of the bootstrap road. But then, of course, eventually you probably will have to find some external capital. But if it is investors, that's why it's also good to start building rapport with some of these investors even early on, even though you may not be the right thing for them right today, but that thing can change down the road. And speaking from an investor's perspective, we love to see how we may say no today, but we like to kind of see how you're doing along the way. Because one thing is kind of hard to tell when investing in an entrepreneur is how they progress over time. Do they give up? Do they keep going? And so sometimes putting someone off for a while, it kind of helps us see how things happen over time. And so, but still good to have that rapport with that person, whoever that is. But at least for today, it's bootstrapping, using, doing some extra consulting work or something else to kind of help fund it and bringing on other team members. We actually got at least about, in addition to team members, we actually utilize some extra interns right now to help them give credit for their school. And we're teaching them a lot of basic things too. But also we having this good relationship where we give them a little bit of something and they help us out as well, So that's always an option too.
So your kind of first hire was, if my understanding is kind of, I know FundingFuel is, it's a platform that's highly, probably technically, I don't know if you have a coder on if your co-founder is a developer, but is he?
No, he's not. He's not. But the third person we brought on is.
Okay, so you looked when you were looking at partners or co-founders or hires, you were looking at what was your need?
Sure, absolutely. Well, I'll first say my co-founder Akash. The good part is that he kind of cold call out of nowhere, and because he basically had
he cold called you.
Yeah, he cold called. You know, he just one random call out the blue. And we just kind of talked because he kind of loved the idea. He had something like he wanted to do this a while ago, and at first he was just saying, "Look, man, I don't quote me on this because I can't remember his exact words, but he was saying something like, "Look, I'll work for you for free, or I'll intern or whatever." And I would say, "Well, let's just work together for a little bit, you know, help us out." And he did it, and eventually after a while, we just built this great rapport, and so he just joined the team, and he has added so much value. And so back to your point of the need, obviously I'm doing everything. So the initial need was that I come from investing in tech startups. I didn't have a direct background in franchising. And so my immediate hurdle was, and then I found out that the franchising world is this close-knit community, good old boys club, right? It's hard to get in unless you know someone. I did not have that. And I was, you know, granted, I pride myself being a great networker. I feel like I can get into anywhere. But it was still a little bit of a hurdle. And my co-founder, his family, he grew up in a franchising industry. His dad has a lot of connections. He has a lot of connections. He just has a passion for franchising. And so that helped expedite that process tremendously. And that was one of the voids that I had, which was getting into this community, because in tech, it's a different climate. And I assumed that it was similar, but it's different, completely different. And so by him joining the team, it helped a lot to fast forward breaking into that market. And so now we have, I'm more confident. We definitely have a good connection in the franchise. And I mean, we're to the point where we actually have we talked to a guy, what's today? Last week, working on a potential, and this probably be accredited investors, but it's an early stage franchising system that he's looking to raise capital. And Akash is the one that found that one. You know, I didn't have nothing to do with that. And so that helped. And then he also found our tech lead guy right now that's actually building our platform to get ready for the approval with the SEC. And so that was just through his connection, because he and I are great at networking and business development, but we're great at it on two different sides. You know, I'm very good on the marketing, consumer, investor side. He's definitely great on the pipeline of deal flow side. And then we kind of come together, and because I'm strong at the structuring aspect, deal structure and all that, but that's where we kind of come back together. And so, but that was the initial pain point, and that's kind of how it came to fruition of the problem that I had, which was breaking into the franchise industry, and he was my gateway into that.
I love it. I feel like you're giving so many good, solid examples of what a lot of others in either not just your type of business, but those who are starting off are going to go through. They're going to go through, you know, how do we find the team that complements each other? How do we get investors? And I love the piece of advice you gave where you said, start that conversation early with investors, and then, you know, watch them, let them see you grow. That's also something we had just recently done a webinar with an investor as well, who talked about the same thing. They want to see the kind of teams that you build, and they also want to see how you grow. They want to see how like you said, do you give up? How do they deal with conflict or issues that come up or challenges? So that's really a strong piece of advice for anyone who's listening and is looking for investors. Make sure you're starting those conversations, make sure they get to know you, and bring them into your process. So before we jump into kind of one of my final questions I have for you is, I did get a question from our comments. So anyone who is watching and wants to ask a question, please put them in the comments. But what area do you feel has been the most upside coming out of the pandemic?
When you say area, are you talking about like an industry or
areas you feel have the most upside coming out of the pandemic? So Yeah.
Probably industries. Okay.
Where you want to interpret that?
I guess because we're talking about investing. So my guess is that the ones that are doing great post pandemic are because one observation.
Franchises have the most upside coming out of the pandemic.
Oh, okay. Great. So I think I already mentioned a couple earlier today. And it's just based off the basic principle because the pandemic shut everything down, and the things that did well. Now this is speaking of food, but things that did well were things that had a lot of systems that already had the contactless operations kind of already in play. Now, so the Little Caesars of the world, the Wingstops of the world, the Domino's of the world, they did great. I mentioned earlier about the home sector. They did great just as a whole, whether franchise or non-franchise, because people are stuck at home and they realize that they hate the paint on the wall, the roof is leaking, whatever, and they've seen a lot more things. So since they're home, they probably also save a lot of money too because they're not driving as much. They're knocking on. I know for us, we got a brand new screen door, a couple of little cosmetic stuff too, done. And so these guys are making a killing because everybody's home. And that trend will probably keep going because of this new hybrid. I don't know what's going to happen, but I assume there's going to be this new hybrid work from home, work from office kind of feel, where or work wherever you are. Kind of. I think that's going to be the nation.
Continues. I think it's a nice work-life balance. So I hope that trend.
I agree. So and speaking of that, I'm going to go back to home again because I was talking to someone else the other day. I got a hunch that the small hometown communities are going to start to thrive up even more because some people love living in the city, but some people love that nice big home in a little quiet town. But they had to live close to the city because that's where the high-paying jobs are at. But now you can get that high-paying job regardless of where you live. So we're probably going to see an uptick of that. And so that's going to mean, how the demographics drive, right? You get more communities, more homes being built. You're going to need more Starbucks of the world. You're going to need more Domino's of the world. You're going to need more home improvement service of the world. I'm trying to think of some more. Of course, technology, anything to kind of help, not all technology, but technology to kind of help with speed of various things with anything with doing with online education. I do think education and daycare probably pick back up a little bit more because I think their kids are probably driving them crazy. But I still think that
experience.
Say it again.
I said, are you speaking from experience?
Yes, I am. Yes, I am speaking from personal experience. I dropped mine off not too long ago, and I was so happy. I kicked him out the car. And he's only 3. So I think there will be a good balance because then because if productivity was already consistent. Because I don't have any hard data. I'm just assuming right now, but I have heard that productivity. That's why people feel like we can work from anywhere because productivity hasn't really dropped, and that's having dropped with kids around. What happens with kids are removed, right? And can productivity really increase even more potentially, right? And so I don't know. I think in terms of technology, more collaborative technology tools. I know that's not necessarily franchising, but just in general. Tools to help people increase productivity, collaborate online, doing things like this StreamYard, a lot of different tools like that to help people get more things done, more productivity tools, I think, or that category will probably keep growing.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love it. I also think that you're right. The franchise industry might be interesting as people start potentially changing the way where they live and yes. How we will see a change in that. So one of the last questions I like to ask is just what is the best advice that you have received or what is the best advice that you kind of give out to those who are going in to start their own business?
I'm gonna say I've received it, but I also give it out too. So this is not mine. It's actually from a franchisee. Failure is tuition. And he's basically taking that from, because you go to school, you pay tuition to learn, right? And failure, in essence, you learn, but the tuition is that the cost that it cost you, right? And so if you built a business and it failed and you lost a lot of money, that was your tuition, assuming that you learned something, right? And so so that phrase kind of helps me to take risk. It helps me to say, Pedro, you know, the reality is if you fail, you're going to learn. So it's not the end of the world. And that's what helps me to because, you know, being an entrepreneur, you know, going after these things, it's risky, it's scary, things can fail, but you got to remind yourself it's okay. You only got to be 80% right. And if you do lose, it's okay as long as you learn. And then you just adjust and adapt and keep moving forward.
I love that. And tuition's very expensive.
Yeah.
So I feel like, and sometimes you don't learn a lot. So yeah. I feel like I love the fact that you said your failure is tuition. So yeah. I hope everyone who's taking that, I'm going to 100% hashtag that and make sure to share that on one of our Monday motivations. So with that, I just want to thank you so much. I don't have any more questions coming in, but I just want to thank you so much for sitting down, talking with us, letting us get to know you more and your business. And I look forward to working with you too later this year, as we have a few other opportunities coming together to partner.
Yes.
So,
yes.
Thank you.
I was going to say, I want to just thank you, Alicia, for you know, selecting me, giving me this opportunity to share my story, and I appreciate what you guys are doing at the EEC. You know, I've known what you guys have been doing for a long time, really helping the community grow businesses, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, all that. So really appreciate you, as well as the EEC, just helping small business owners and entrepreneurs all over the county.
Thank you. We do our best. And with the pandemic, we've been working harder even to make sure that we're getting our message out there and helping small businesses through this moment of recovery. For those who want to connect with you, how can they do that?
Sure. Well, my email is hello@fundingfuel.com. And you can also follow us on social media, everything FundingFuel. So Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, fundingfuel.com. I mean, I'm sorry, don't put .com. Social media is FundingFuel on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook.
So follow at FundingFuel?
Yes.
So to connect with Pedro and learn more about FundingFuel, you can email hello@fundingfuel or follow FundingFuel.
Hello@fundingfuel.com.
Hello@fundingfuel.com.
Yeah. Correct. And then the social media is just FundingFuel.
Perfect. All right. And I am, make sure I have that correct. Okay. I would say email fuel.
Okay.
All right. I'm putting that into the comments. And I just want to thank you again. So make sure that you guys follow FundingFuel, reach out to Pedro at hello@fundingfuel.com. And have a wonderful rest of your day, everyone. Thank you.